Well, we're in our second week and the second chapter of the book of Jonah, this short sermon series through this minor prophet in the Old Testament. If you're looking for Jonah, Jonah is the fifth of 12 minor prophets in the way that the order will likely be in your Bible, almost certainly. So if you're trying to find it, go ahead and dive through. It's going to be after the big, long, major prophets, and we're going to see Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah. So go ahead and find your way there. We'll put the verses up behind me on the slides here so you can follow along. But a quick recap is to see where we're headed. Jonah was that prophet who was commanded by God to arise, head to Nineveh, and call out against that wicked city. Last week, we kind of walked through a bit of how Jonah arose, and he went the opposite direction where God had told him to go. Instead of going east toward Nineveh, he went west towards Tarshish. So he goes down to the coastland, goes to Joppa, he gets on a ship there and invests probably significant capital in going the opposite direction. His desire was to go away from the presence of the Lord. So Jonah makes his way to the west. He tries to flee God, and God's not going to have any part of it. In fact, he causes the wind to come upon the sea, and a great tempest arises, and the ship is thrown about, and even the seasoned captain and the sailors were so concerned, so scared, that they began to throw all of their investments over the side of the boat into the water. They didn't even care about money anymore. They just wanted to save their lives. And they realized that this wasn't a normal storm. This was some kind of divinely imposed tempest. So they all started praying to their false gods. And the captain even grabs Jonah. You wake up. Pray to your God that maybe we'll be okay. They try to find out who was the cause of this. Which God is causing this storm? It's got to be a God. There's got to be one of you that's angered, one of these gods. And they cast lots and they see that it's Jonah. And Jonah admits, yes, it is me. I fear the Lord, Yahweh, the creator of the sea and of the dry land. And they knew that it was him. And he said, throw me in, kill me. Just throw me into the water. Maybe then God will relent from this disaster that's coming upon you. And the guys didn't want to do it. They didn't want to do it. They tried to row back to shore, and they were unable to counteract God's judgment. And so they cried out to God, Lord, we fear you, and in great fear, don't hold this man's blood against us. And they throw him into the water. And that's where we pick up today. Let's read this text out loud together. We're going to do the last verse of chapter 1 and all of chapter 2, short 10 verses. And the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish, saying, I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight. Yet I shall again look upon your holy temple. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped about my head. At the roots of the mountains I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. When my life was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you, into your holy temple. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. But I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. And the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land. Let's pray. Father, we, as always, ask you this morning for help. These are just words. It's just a story. Maybe even one that would draw skepticism from our fleshly hearts. If not for your Spirit opening our eyes and the minds of our soul to see and understand what's going on here. Father, I admit here that I am powerless to help anyone present understand and be served by this passage apart from you. And so, Lord, I appeal to you today that you would speak, that you would give us clarity, that you would show us truth, and that we would be helped by it. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. The first verse, again, we covered today, chapter 1, verse 17, says, And the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. This part of the story begins with Jonah in the water and God appointing a fish. This word appoint is used 4 times in the book of Jonah. This is the first time it shows up. We'll see it 3 more times in chapter 4. We'll get there in the whole flowering of the bush that comes over Jonah and the worm that comes. We'll see that again when we get there and we'll walk through that. But right now we see that God acts. He puts his hand into the situation. God's hand of providence is all over this book. It's one of the central themes of this minor prophet of Jonah. God working, God doing things, God appointing, him causing things to take place. This time he appoints a great fish to obey his command, to swallow up Jonah. Now, great fish here, this literally in Hebrew means aquatic creature. And while I forget who it was I was talking to about this, maybe it was Michael, we were chatting about how it's typical that whenever we talk about Jonah and even images, I think that the image that I quickly put together for the cover slide for this has a tail of a whale. We think of a whale oftentimes. It's the biggest of the fishies we can imagine. And yes, I know it's a mammal. It's not properly a fish, but we picture a whale. Interesting, Hebrews did have a word for whale. They were aware of the aquatic landscape well enough to know what a whale was and what a whale wasn't. And that word is not employed here. In other words, Jonah, likely the one recording precisely what's going down, knowing what a whale is and what it isn't, says that it's not the whale word, but it's the great fish. In fact, the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, uses a word that means huge sea fish. So when we say fish, that's really what we mean, an aquatic creature of some kind. It can cover a vast array of critters in the sea. This is the 4th miracle listed in Jonah. The 4th miracle. Last week I shared that there are at least 10 miracles in the book of Jonah. Depending on how you count them, there's 10 miracles. We've already covered the first 3. This is the 4th of those miracles. We haven't even gotten out of the first chapter yet. The second sentence of this same verse will be the 5th miracle, but something specific happens. God commands and a fish obeys. It's miraculous. The next sentence there is, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. 3 days and 3 nights. This, of course, is the 5th miracle. 4th being the fish obeyed and went to Jonah and swallowed him. Okay? 5th being Jonah survived for 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a fish. Now, is this to be taken literally? Let me just cover that real quick here. Is this to be literally understood? It's important to note that Jesus refers to Jonah on several occasions, at least 2 separate occasions. Maybe 2 of them are recorded twice, once in Luke and once in Matthew. But as Jesus points to at least one of those occasions talking about Jonah, he actually calls upon this precise component of the miracle story of Jonah. The idea that he was in the belly 3 days and 3 nights. So in Matthew chapter 12, verse 40, Jesus says, "For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish, of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." Now, because Jesus uses this language here and a few other things we see in Jonah, it's actually led to many believers, Christians, Bible scholars, to think that it's possible that the miracle taking place is not Jonah surviving 3 days in the belly of the great fish, but dying. His prayer that will be listed in chapter 2 would be his final cries out to God as he's fading in and out of consciousness, going dead for 3 days and 3 nights, like Jesus will be dead 3 days, 3 nights, or 3 days counted in the Jewish system, and that Jonah would be spit out. And the miracle is that he came back alive at the end of this whole thing. That's the way some people view this. I'm not convinced of that, but I think it is possible, and perhaps something you might consider if you're studying through this and trying to understand what's taking place. Here's one thing we can know for certain. Of all the miracles in the Bible, this one, this 5th miracle listed in the book of Jonah, often gets singled out as so preposterous, so far-fetched, that it is taken to be proof for many skeptics that the Bible couldn't possibly be true. And perhaps for even more people, not just that the Bible can't be trusted, but even if it generally can be trusted, it should be looked at with great skepticism. that it either ought not to be taken literally, because there's no way that could happen, or something got lost in translation and we need to hold it at an arm's length. I want to take a moment and talk a quick word about events such as these recorded in the Bible. Let's start with our worldview here for a moment. There is an assumption, I would say it's a dominant presupposition by Western thinkers, okay? Just meaning that the majority of the people you will likely meet in America, in the West, assume that everything can or must be explained by the scientific method, explained by science. Now, I'm trying to use that term colloquially, science. We kind of throw that in as a junk drawer term for observable, repeatable, testable methodologies to determine if something can take place. Okay, that's what I mean. I'm trying to use it in a way that most people are using it here. Quick line about this. Christians love science because we are truth seekers. We love truth. We just want to know how things work and how they happen. And we can look at the scientific method and test things out and see how God has designed the world. And we look at the stars and we glory in God. God made the stars work like that. And God made storms come and go and seasons and weather operate this way. And we love science. I think we ought to. We can. But, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, hopefully for your benefit, good science always agrees with good theology. Good science always agrees with good theology. Science is not at odds with God, but scientism is at odds with God in a theistic worldview. Here's what I mean by scientism. Scientism is a term that's kind of the merging of science plus atheism. Okay? It's just a materialistic, naturalistic system. Scientism is the view that empirical science constitutes the most authoritative worldview to the exclusion of other viewpoints. Okay? This is the dominant view of atheist agnostics in the world today, that if it can't be explained by material, repeatable, observable, expected ways of natural law, then it cannot be known to be true. Okay? The Bible records, though, not only natural, but supernatural events. Science cannot be used to explain supernatural phenomena, because science, by its very nature, deals with nature, not supernature. It deals with the ordinary, not the extraordinary. In fact, the way that the Bible talks about these phenomena, it uses words like signs, wonders, miracles. Those are the most common words used to refer to these supernatural kinds of events. So, quick definition of miracle that perhaps would be helpful for us moving forward. What is a miracle? A miracle is God working into creation in a way that he does not ordinarily act. God working into creation in a way that he does not ordinarily act. And here's why I'm trying to helpfully define it in this way. Because Christians use the word miracle similarly to the way that many people in the world use the word science. It means lots of things depending on how you're defining it. So we might look at the birth of a baby as miraculous. And I think that in some sense it is miraculous. It's amazing. Have you ever witnessed birth, or the idea of a baby coming into the world and all that has to take place in order for a soul to be clothed in body and grow in the womb and be born. It's fantastic. And sometimes we call it the miracle of birth. But it's not properly a miracle in the sense that it is ordinary. According to Siri, 372,000 babies are born every day. Okay? All of us were born. So you see what I mean by ordinary as versus extraordinary? So it's miraculous in a sense, but if we were using the proper idea of miracle, some way that God works into creation in a way he doesn't ordinarily act, well, it's technically natural. It's really ordinary. It happens to every human who ever has lived, right? Billions of us. But the parting of the Red Sea, we know that happened once in that location. Wall of water on the right and on the left. That's extraordinary. That's not ordinary. That doesn't happen 372,000 times a day. It doesn't happen in the life of every person. It's not the experience of every mother or father. It is unique. Because these events are extraordinary, we cannot apply natural laws to them. A scientist, then, can no more offer help in regards to these supernatural events than my auto mechanic can offer help when I need a root canal. Different categories, right? Don't feel like you need a natural answer to Jonah, the Exodus, creation, resurrection, healings, etc. How is it possible for a man to live for 3 days underwater inside the belly of a fish? How is it possible for a man who was laid in a tomb for 4 days, Lazarus, to raise from the dead? How is it possible for a man who was born blind to have his sight restored? The answer is it isn't possible. It is utterly impossible. It is scientifically implausible. And on that account, Christians and atheists ought to agree. But in the words of Jesus, what is impossible with man is possible with God. While being miraculously sustained inside the belly of this fish, this is what Jonah prays, starting in chapter 2. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish, saying, I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. So Jonah prayed. Now in chapter 1, we know that the captain of the vessel came to him below. You're still sleeping. He woke up. Arise, you sleeper, and pray to your God. We don't know that he did yet, but we know that he does pray here. We know that he does cry out to God here. And if you read this carefully, you may notice something here. Jonah switches from third person to first person here. He also switches from past tense to present tense throughout the course of this. So look right here at the second sentence in verse 2 here. I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. He answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. Do you see how he does that? So in one sense, he's telling us the prayer he gave to God. And in the next sense, he's actually repeating the prayer he said to God. See this? He'll also talk about things that sound as though they're a present reality of him being in the underwater and down in the place where he's going to die and in his present distress. And then he'll also use language that's past tense. And but God did this when I was there, okay? Here's why this is helpful to understand. Jonah didn't have a quill and a parchment in the belly of the fish. This prayer is obviously a compilation of what was prayed in the belly and afterward for our benefit. So Jonah is hearkening back to and remembering the time when he was in the belly, and he's telling us, this is what I prayed. And he's throwing in bits every once in a while about what he now sees as the reality of what took place there. This happens in our conversion stories often, in our retelling of them, where in the moment something goes down, something's happening spiritually that's hard for us to understand or acknowledge or even talk about. And later, as we learn through the Bible, the language that is employed to describe what took place, we go, oh yeah. And when we retell the testimony, we oftentimes insert things in there based upon the language we have now learned about what actually took place. I think Jonah is doing the same thing here. If there's any question about how these words should work out sometimes, that might be helpful to bear in mind. He says, out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. Sheol is a Hebrew word that is used 66 times in the Old Testament. It's translated almost always Sheol or the grave. And it refers to, quite simply, death. Death properly. It doesn't typically bear properties explicitly of a heaven as we understand it, or a hell as we understand it. It typically is talking about death. One of the places we see a little bit of an understanding of this is the comparison given in Psalm 139:8. David says, if I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. Sounds like a parallelism. But what David points to here is the understanding of many of the Old Testament writers that death wasn't the place to finally be away from God. But many of them understood death as a place they couldn't get away from God. Remember, Jonah was trying to flee God, but God wouldn't allow it. He continues in verse 3, for you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Jonah here rightly attributes his suffering, his struggle, this calamity to God. Remember, one of the things I noted last week that I personally find interesting, odd. There's not a really good reason given. But Jonah doesn't just jump into the water when he goes, oh man, the boat, you're going to die. I got this, and dive. He doesn't do that. He tells the men to throw him in. They won't even do it until after they realize they can't get back to shore on their own, and then they do it, right? But Jonah does not attribute the being tossed into the sea either to himself or to these other men, but he attributes it directly and explicitly to God. You cast me into the deep. He continues on with that line of thinking. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Even the waves and the billows belong to God. Jonah acknowledges that God is the one who brings about his calamity. I would caution my Christian brothers and sisters from ever saying that God would never do anything to hurt me. It's just not true. In fact, if you believe that, if you say that or think that, what are you going to do when bad things do happen to you? They inevitably will. Let me go out on a limb here. I don't think it's much of one, biblically speaking, but perhaps in our minds it might be. This is an entirely unchristian notion. Entirely unchristian. To say that God does not ordain our suffering. In fact, I was just researching the way the world views the idea of suffering and struggle and God's play in all of this. And it's one of the characteristics of false religions, specifically the Christian-like, those who try to attribute themselves to Christianity of some form of theism, monotheism. It's typical of false religions to invert the biblical teaching on God ordaining suffering. So I found this on Jehovah's Witnesses' main website this last week. This is jw.org. It's probably the best example of I could get this as clearly and succinct. At jw.org, this is the quote. Quote, the Bible clearly teaches that God does not cause us to suffer. God never causes the trials we face or the suffering that follows. To do so would be wicked. Unquote. It's altogether unchristian. Ephesians 1:11 says, in him we have obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. All things according to the counsel of his will. Now, real quick, I don't want to give you an out here, and this might be the out. Ritch, are you talking about discipline? Yeah, God disciplines. No, I am not talking just about discipline. Yes, God disciplines those whom he loves. Yes, God brings physical calamity upon his children for our benefit. Yes, he does. That is not the limit or extent to what the Bible teaches about the ordination of suffering. Every ounce of your suffering has been ordained by God. In my personal Bible time these past couple months, I've been reading through Job. And the story of Job begins with God provoking Satan to bring suffering upon Job. Think about Genesis 50, where Joseph, after having been sold into slavery by his brothers and mistreated in prison and all of the terrible things that took place and went about him. And these brothers finally realized towards the end of the story, oh my goodness, I cannot believe what we have done. We have done this. Oh no. And when Joseph's father Jacob dies, all of his brothers are worried. Oh, now that dad's not here to protect us, he's going to kill us. He's going to do something. We have to go fall before his feet and apologize because Joseph is now far more powerful than we are. And he could kill us in a moment if he wanted to. Daddy's not here to protect us. We got to go to him and apologize and hope that he won't hurt us. And so they fall before Joseph and they tell him, oh, please, please, please. We did such wicked things. Don't hurt us. Don't hurt us. And this is what Joseph says to him in Genesis 50, verse 20. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. They meant evil, but God meant good. He didn't just take the evil and find a way to show a ray of light. God meant those things for good. God ordains even our suffering. God sent the storm in chapter 1. God brings disasters. Amos 3:6 says, does disaster come to a city unless the Lord has done it? There is no greater act of suffering given in the Bible than that of Jesus. Unjust kind of suffering, human perspective, unjust suffering. Who caused that? Acts 2:23 says, this Jesus delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God. You crucified and killed by the hands of lawless men. Who did it? These lawless men did it. Who planned it? God planned it. God ordained it. God determined that it would be so. Why is this a good thing? Because it means that your suffering has purpose. It means that your suffering has an intended plan, determined outcome, purpose by God to work into your life. I bet we've all been in situations where we've had a hospital visit and spent time next to somebody and we've held the hand of a person who's sick and ailing and we don't even know what to say. We don't know what to do. We just sit there and we just hear the story of what happened, and then when it has to be quiet, we just sit there with them, and we don't have many answers, just want to be there with them. Not so with God. God is not just the passive observer of your pain, nor is he the doctor who comes in after the suffering has taken place to try to heal. He's not passive. He appointed it. Like he appointed the fish. Some of you know unbelieving loved ones who are running from God, just as Jonah was. This last week I was talking to my parents on the phone, and specifically to my mother when it was her turn to chat. And I asked her about a stray sibling of mine who has run away and chosen a life despising God. And I asked my mother about, how are you doing with that? And like on cue, she burst into tears. Just wept and wept. She said, I've been praying. I pray every day. I pray every day. And I said in the Bible verses, every day. I say, what are you praying for? And then she chokes up even more. And she says, I pray that God would crush him. I have a good mom. And she loves her children, and she loves her 16 and counting grandchildren. And she wants good. She wants good for us. She would die for us. I have a good mom. How could she pray that God would crush her rebellious child? Obviously, because pain is often used by God to draw people to him. There is purpose in pain. There is purpose in it. And that doesn't just stop when a person gets saved. We're not just the ones who just receive all the good, plentiful prosperity because we're following God. It doesn't work that way. In fact, pain, suffering, struggle, persecution is far more promised than any earthly blessing. In fact, it's interesting because we just talked about miracles. Do you want to know, if you want to see a miracle in your life? Almost every time that miracles are taking place in the Bible, somebody's getting killed for being a Christian, or beaten for it, or imprisoned for it. Don't expect the miracle without expecting the struggle and the suffering and the trial. God has ordained that we will suffer. God doesn't just, the blessing is the God stuff, and the suffering, well, that must be Satan. That just must be the enemy. It doesn't work that way. We sometimes pray for the relief of pain and suffering in our Christian brothers and sisters, but not always. Not always. We don't always just pray that it goes away. Think of the emotional burden, the depression, the stress that even an apostle like Paul can carry on his heart. I've been sharing this with a handful of you at some point or another in this past couple of weeks. I've just been meditating on this verse in 2 Corinthians chapter 1. Verses 8 through 9 says, "For we do not want you to be unaware, brothers, of the affliction we experienced in Asia. For we were so utterly burdened beyond our own strength that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt that we had received the sentence of death. But that was to make us rely not on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead." That was to make us rely, not on selves, but God. God used it. God didn't merely and only find, oh, you got in a mess. Let me see what I can do. He made that happen. That they would rely. You know, later in the same book of 2 Corinthians, in chapter 12, Paul will actually talk about a thorn in the flesh. It's torturing him, and he prayed to God, and God would not let it go. Why? Because he wanted Paul to learn the lesson, to rely on him and see that God's grace is sufficient. God ordains all of our suffering. It is meaningful. It is to be useful for you. It is to shape you into what he wants you to be. It's to alert you to sins you may not have even seen. It's to save a person who's not yet saved. It has purpose. It has great purpose. So we don't just whine when it happens. We cry out to God. We ask for relief. And at the end we say, to God be the glory. We say things like are written in the scriptures. Hosea 6:1. Come, let us return to the Lord, for he has torn us that he may heal us. I've been reading the C.S. Lewis Chronicles of Narnia with my kids, and we just finished the third book just a little bit ago, A Horse and His Boy, and there's one scene where Aslan, the lion, who represents God, really the Son, really represents Jesus' character throughout the whole story of the books. There's one scene in which this lion, Aslan, is chasing after the boy and the girl on their horses, trying to get away, and he's in the jungle, and he jumps up with his claws, and he shreds the back of this little girl's back, just rips into her. And she barely makes it out alive, and she gets into the home of a hermit who takes her in and lays her on her face, and she's passed out for like a day, and then she just heals from her wounds over the course of the next several days. She's actually out of the story. From that point forward, the next 5 chapters, she's not in because she was so wounded by it. And later, a little boy runs into a lion who he hears speaking to him and sees him, and he says, "You're the lion." And he goes, "I'm not just a lion. I'm the only lion you have seen through all your journeys." The boy says, "But why? If you're so good, would you have hurt my friend?" And he says, "I have reasons you won't even know about." He says, "I am myself. I am myself." I like those stories because they help shatter false notions. Like God would never want to hurt. Yes, he might. For he has torn us that he may heal us. This is a heavy truth. This is why Job, in the midst of his suffering, all of his children killed. By God's ordained plan, he says to God, "Though you slay me, I will hope in you." Jonah in verse 4 says, "Then I said, I am driven away from your sight, yet I shall again look upon your holy temple. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped about my head. At the roots of the mountains, I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God." Jonah says that he was driven from the sight of God. The waters closed in around him. The language he uses here shows utter despair. Up until that point, Jonah had no hope. He thought he was going to die. This is why the guy said, "We're not going to let the blood be on our hands." They wouldn't just say, "Well, we can toss, you'll just swim away. I'm sure you'll survive." They thought that he was going to die. That was the whole point. They wouldn't throw him in. The expectation was that life over. No more Nineveh command. I'm out of this deal. He was hopeless. I know that many of you, maybe even right now, feel like you're in a season of hopelessness. No hope. But don't believe that. Jonah was literally in greater depths than you and I are in. And not just Jonah. The loss those experienced throughout the scriptures is great. We have a record of history of people who've gone through far greater struggles than you and I have gone through. And even if somehow we were to try to match struggle for struggle, despair for despair, the point is that even at the greatest possible depths of our sinking, we are not without hope. Jonah may have had no hope in himself, but he did have hope in God. 2 times in this verse he says, Yet I shall again look upon your holy temple. And then again towards the end, yet you brought up my life. But God, turning point stuff, but God. This has to be part of every Christian testimony. I was on a path to destruction, to death, to separation from God for forever. But God showed up. But God showed up. Think about what your but God moment was. And as we think about that, the warning might be, don't think that you'll only have one but God moment. Our life story is not to be one where God showed up, but God shows up. He keeps showing up. So you don't get into the despair moment again and be like, what's going on? I already been through this before. Paul, right? Paul, on his way to kill Christians on the road to Damascus, gets struck to the ground and he blinded, and he goes into despair. Oh no, what have I been doing? What have I been doing? But God. And then later, there's many more but God showed up moments. God shows up. All of our despair and the potential of depression and struggle and the frustrations of life and the deep hurt and pains of the difficulties that we deal with all the time, they don't go away when we get saved. In fact, as we talked about many times, as results of the flesh versus spirit battle inside of you, they're probably going to get worse in that regard. Why would God ordain for us to go through these struggles? That we would rely not on self, but on God. We walk through the beautiful doctrine of preservation of the saints on Wednesday night in our men's group. And one of the most beautiful things to talk about in there is the way that God has ordained to preserve is through the warnings of the Bible. Through the warnings. It's the intended way, the ordained way. And God works out our preservation in such a way that every step we must rely upon and give glory to God. Jonah would return again to a season of despair. Chapter 4, we'll get there. He was in despair and God saved him. But he's going to go right back pretty quick to another one. There may be many of those but God moments in your life, and be prepared. God may be working on you in ways you didn't know. When my life was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. A couple things quickly here. Life was fainting away. He was about to be dead, he thought. My prayer came to you into your holy temple. This is an Old Testament expression about God hearing the prayers of the people. That was the center of Hebrew worship. The expectation was that prayers going to the temple, it's God hearing the prayers, seated on the throne, the mercy seat in the holiest of holies. He was at the point of death. This is similar to consider the Exodus type of story, where God heard the cry of the people. God hearing the cry is like the step that they're seeking for. That's what they're looking for. Oh, just if God can just hear my cry, then he can do something. He says in verse 8, those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. Idols were powerless to save you, and even more powerless to offer steadfast love. You can either have the steadfast love of God or the mute powerlessness of an idol. Verse 9 says, but I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. When Jonah says, what I have vowed, he's probably talking about a free will offering. Not a sin atonement kind of offering, but a free will offering or a love offering, where a person out of their good heart can make a particular type of vow to God to give a particular something. Not what was demanded or expected for atonement, but something that was just to give love and honor to God. That's probably what he means. And he acknowledges salvation belongs to the Lord. That his only chance of being saved was God. His only chance. Psalm 3:8 says, salvation belongs to the Lord. Revelation 7:10, an image of the hosts of people, the innumerable masses, praising the name of our God. They sing, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. Salvation belongs to God. I have no way out of this apart from you. And the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land. This is the 6th miracle in the book of Jonah, as I've counted them here so far. The fish vomits Jonah onto the shore. After 3 days of instruction, just like Nineveh will be delivered after 3 days of instruction, we'll get there in future weeks. God rescues Jonah. Jonah's going to die. The fish was his lifeboat. The fish was his deliverance. The very thing that prolonged his pain and his suffering was meant by God for his good and for the good of the people of Nineveh. These are the types of encouragements we get from seeking what God has done through his people, even into the Old Testament. My hope as we continue on in this series, we've only got 2 more weeks. The next week we'll cover chapter 3, what happens in Nineveh. And the week after that is chapter 4. We'll cover what happens just on the outskirts of Nineveh as Jonah considers what is taking place. But these themes that we see at almost every turn in Jonah is God's ultimate providential power being played out throughout all of this. And his loving, gracious mercy, not only for the people of Nineveh, but even for Jonah. My hope is that we'll see that clearer and clearer into the coming weeks. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for this passage of Scripture. Lord, there are so many, I think, today who dishonor your word and your name by not taking serious passages like this due to skepticism in many different ways. Lord, forgive us collectively for that. Father, I pray that as a congregation we would let each word of sacred Scripture wash over us, and we'd sit on it and chew on it and seek understanding of it for your glory. God, you have revealed yourself to us as a God who works providentially over all the effects of mankind and this creation under your order. Father, I pray that we can see and understand that we can embrace not just our human assumptions, Lord, but what you have claimed to be true about yourself, what you have revealed to us through your word. Father, help us to be encouraged. God, my heart this whole week as I was preparing for this, Father, was just hurting and saddened and at times tears to my eyes because of the pain and the despair and the hopeless feeling of many people that I've met in my life, Christian brothers and sisters, even here in Utah. Lord, I pray that we can read stories of Jonah and we can see your amazing grace, your supernatural mercy, your deliverance from even the most incredible circumstances, your willingness to ordain suffering for us because of your great love. Father, let us see that. Let us see that you are a God who gives and takes away. Father, help us to see that you are a God who is so much bigger than the world wants us to believe, so much bigger than so many false religions want us to believe. Help us to see these things and embrace them and love you for who you really are, not just an image we have made in our own minds. Lord, let us not make you in our image, but see that we are made in yours. Father, serve my congregation, my brothers and sisters, those whom I love, as you have promised to help and to serve us as we seek your face, seek to love you. And for those who are enduring very specific seasons of physical, emotional trials because of something explicitly in their own life or someone that they love, I pray for a supernatural, special grace and mercy upon them, that you would show them a kind of love that they will need, especially in this season. Teach them to rely upon you. And Lord, not only will that glorify you, but that will serve the rest of the brothers and sisters as they offer comfort in future seasons. God, we ask for your help in all this and pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.